So we are not just seeing but also hearing Budapest.
Very good, very good. Yes, yes.
Very good, very good. It's awesome to see you. We will
Thank
start.
you.
We'll start with a prayer as we're supposed to, and then we'll have.
All right. I will join you distantly.
Yes, do this. Right, so I hope it was a powerful transatlantic prayer. So, and
It was
delighted, and I mean it's not just a filler, to introduce esteemed colleague, Dr. Viktor Alexandrov, who is, as myself, a native of the country that doesn't exist anymore. So, and he has been living, I believe now, most of his life in Hungary, right?
yes,
So,
absolutely.
so he mastered that very complicated language, and he defended his dissertation, which I studied on form chair, which is Russian canon. So tracing various versions, various ramifications throughout Slavic work. So that's what he did, and he is, I would call him a leading expert on very original Orthodox theologian, because if something that we contributed as Russian Orthodox to the table as in field of theology, Father Nicholas Afanasiev would be definitely the one, and he was influential outside of the Orthodox Church too. So we are very lucky to have Dr. Alexandrov at short notice with us today. So if there is something you would like to add or correct me to what I said, Dr. Alexandrov.
No, all was correct. Just to give some background to the background, I'm in the office, and the office is quite peculiar. You can see it's a former elevator producing factory. That's why it looks how it looks, with high ceiling. So the place I'm talking from is also a quite peculiar one.
Right. So let me do a brief introduction. Right. So you won't be able. I don't think you will see Brat Ivan. Brat Ivan, can you make yourself? So this is Brat Ivan.
Now I can see him. Thank you.
I will just introduce yourself for the sake of time. So he's from originally from Crimea, but spent also like a huge chunk of his life in the Republic of California. So and then we have Konstantin, who is a native of Washington State, and behind him is Dima Shaposhnikov.
Nice to see you.
A New Englander. So, and then we have Adam from the state of Montana, who attended Greek Orthodox parish there. And then Brat Stefan Lukianov from Lakewood community, New Jersey. And we have Oleg, who also finished school in Moscow, but then he moved to the Garden State of New Jersey. So here we are.
I see. Very good, very good. Several Russian speakers, so they will be a particular experts in the topic. If that's all, we can actually start. And Father Andrei told me that you were given a reading, 2 articles by Father Nicholas. Well, I must say that these articles, if you read them without at least slight knowledge of Father Nicholas, are not an easy reading. That's why I would like just to ask you around, how did you like them? Were they difficult? And what did you get from them? So if you can formulate in 1 or 2 sentences the idea of the article you liked more, out of the two, it would be very interesting, because I'm curious. I suppose you are not reddish in Father Nicholas' writings. I'm curious how the person who approaches him for the first time perceives his writings. Oh,
Right.
very good. Go ahead.
I'd like to talk about the first article on the canonical consciousness of the church. I found that article really interesting because the approach which Nicholas took. So he would not just explain what it is in the beginning, would be the core and the definition of a true canonical consciousness, but he would give first the examples what it is not. And he would go on and explain why it is not. It's not the case. And in the end, he would about the dogmas as being a canonical consciousness of the church. So,
I see. I see. Very interesting. Thank you. Anybody else would like to share his experience? Of course, I do not remember names. I need half a year to remember your names. So please, I will point to you with my finger, please. Yeah, go ahead.
So it means you're going to be for half an year with us. So, okay.
No, just to talk also about Oleg's point. In the second article, it kind of wraps everything that he was talking about from the first article. And just the fact that, just to say that the church cannot be overtaken by the world. And, he goes in very it reminds me of how we were just reading St. Augustine, a lot of paradoxical stuff. But then finally, he comes and he leaves the last paradox of that, the church cannot be overtaken by the world, but that they are still one. Simply by that, but that the fact of the matter that the second article really ties in everything that we read over about the consciousness of how you use the canon and how it can't just be, one way this way, one way that way. And how we focus on just humanum, like the Latin word, of just how it's the person saying these things compared to how we actually think about that. It's actually the Spirit divinely inspiring them to then put it into writings. To always make sure that that's actually the center focus.
I see. Good. Thank you. More responses?
Right. Can you answer also question about the level of difficulty? I think that was a very good question from please.
I mean, I don't think it was very difficult. I like how the way to describe pretty much everything. And for example, in the second reading, when he talks about how canons kind of interacted with dogmas and how Bishop Wolf said it in one of our classes, like dogmas is like if someone changes that's what we believe in, and canos is we kind of use as guidance, and he kind of talks about it in one of the articles, how why the canons they change as the church history revolves, and because church deals with different things, and when some of the canons were written during a certain part of the period, church was dealing with certain problems, but now we don't deal with those problems, and the church doesn't use canons.
So I thought that out of all the articles that Father Andrei has given us so far, these two were probably easier to actually understand.
Wow, not for me. I'm glad to hear it.
I think the reason why is just because I could right away understand the points that he was trying to make.
Wow.
Being that the church, as the church progressed, it's not enough to just only follow canons and dogma. There's the core of the church itself, and the second article kind of went more into how Christ, in a way, set it up when there's Latin terms of, I think it's ex humanis and ex divinum, and how it takes more than just memorizing dogma and canons. And it said that the longer that the church goes without any problems or heresies or whatnot, the stronger the structure of the church itself.
Right. So and also mind the time that we only got 1 hour. So do we?
I see.
Are we good? Do you want to get more responses, or you?
We are good. It was interesting. Well, for those who considers these articles difficult, I will tell not to be upset, because my personal experience with Father Nicholas was like that. That I bought his book, The Church of the Holy Spirit, in metro in Moscow. I just quickly checked the content. Well, it seemed me interesting. I was historian. I was studying history, and I saw that it is a professional. I bought it, read it in a while for the first time, and understood very little. And it is a historical book, The Church of the Holy Spirit. I read this book several times, yeah, now I can say that I understand the major content of that. But for the first approach, Father Nicholas is a tough reading. And even, there is Father Christophe Delazio, who wrote a book in French about Afanasiev's theology. Well, he also told me that, well, reading in French, in French translations or in English, well, Afanasiev is a tough reading. So that's the book counts if you put it on your shelf. And you can approach it several times. Well, that's a real book, the book which rightly occupies place on your shelf. And Father Nicholas is writer of this quality. Let me give you some historical background to these two articles. The first of them, about canonical consciousness, right? What is the name? Canon law, and I don't remember the title in English. The first one about canonical consciousness was written.
Changeable and non-changeable.
That's probably the second one. Let me check. I have the book. Well, I actually edited the volume of Afanasiev's writings, collected and published in Russian. And canons and canon law consciousness. That's the earliest article, and it is 1932, as far as I remember, 33, in Berdyaev's journal Put, the Way. Well, Berdyaev edited in Immigration, a journal where all kind of emigre people published, and this was one of this was his first canon law writings. Afanasiev was at that time living in Paris. He was a son of a lawyer from Odessa. It's very interesting because Father George Florovsky was also from Odessa, and as Afanasiev started a theological current in the 20th century, Father George also started a theological current. So two major theological currents of the 20th century Orthodox theology are coming from Odessa. There was something in the air of that city. Interesting even now, and at that period, probably even more interested, as it was a half Russian-speaking city, population made 50% by Russians, 30% was Jewish, and the rest 20 were divided. Was divided between Ukrainians, Albanians, Tatars, Greeks, Italians, German colonists. So it was a sort of very Western city, very southern city, new one, and a sort of small Babylon. Florovsky describes it with great warmth. You can read his biography by Andrew Blaine. So he was a son of lawyer, student first of medicine, then of mathematics, recruited as a student to artillery during the World War. Then took part as a white officer, I guess Poruchik, lieutenant in white armies. Officer. He was a white officer, evacuated with Wrangel's army from Crimea on Constantinople's raid. Sorry, I don't know how they call it in English. He changed the ship and boarded the ship going to Serbia. So he became the so-called refugee from the white officer. The ship arrived to Kotor, and in a while, Afanasiev made a major step. He entered the theological faculty of Belgrade University. It was the first year of that theological faculty, and it was fascinating in terms of students, because his course mates were Archimandrite Cyprian Kern and Nicolas Zernov and Saint John of Shanghai and San Francisco. Took part in Belgrade theological circle, but in a while a split started in the circle, and he leaned for those who supported rather metropolitan eulogy, and all of them several of them found their place soon in Paris. Afanasiev he graduated from the theological faculty in 29 and worked as a teacher of law of God, of religion in school in Macedonia, and then moved first with a stipend to Paris. They needed a canon lawyer. He was a historian, and his first writings were written on a topic close to canon law, about the power and its about koine, the councils, local councils, but not ecclesiastical councils in the Byzantine Empire, early Byzantine Empire. St. Serge Institute in Paris needed a lawyer, canon lawyer, and there were very few ones in emigration. One of them lived in Belgrade, Sergei Viktorovich Troitsky, and he even came to give lectures to Paris, but probably at that time, either they had a discord with Metropolitan Eulogy, or he was just already settled in Yugoslavia. For some reason, Afanasiev was recommended by Zienkovsky, and he started teaching canon law sources, then canon law in Paris. It happened in 1930, so this is the article from his first Paris years. And meanwhile, he finished approximately at that time a book on Nestorian, on Monophysite, from the history of Monophysite debates in the 5th century, Ibas of Edessa, and something else, and his time. The book was not published. The book has not been published until recently. In 30s, he switched. Paris had a very good milieu. He was close to Father Sergei Bulgakov, was his spiritual son. In 30s, he wrote another book on the councils. That's the period when these two articles were written. He was writing the second book. He started writing on the councils, early councils of the church. It was not finished and was published only recently too. So he had approximately, by the time the second article was published, let me see the date of publication of changeable and unchangeable. It's 37. No, the book on the councils was not ready yet. When writing the second article, he was already more established researcher, but still his theology was being formed. And here in these articles you can see how it was formed. After reading before the seminar these two articles anew, I had a question to Father Afanasiev, what follows? Because in this, what follows after the articles? In these articles you can see, and in the second one stronger probably than in the first one, you see appeal to the dogmatic teaching about the Church. So he insists more and more vigorously that canonical consciousness is inseparable from dogmatic consciousness, and canons are actually continuation of the dogmatic teaching of the Church. And I do not know if you had this question to Father Nicholas. I had after reading, and what is the dogmatic teaching of the Church then? Right? Because what can we say about the dogmatic teaching of the Church? We have only one line in Creed about that. It's definitely not enough to develop the topic of canonical consciousness and to explain all the multiplicity of canons we have. But to this question, Father Nicholas answered by his subsequent work, because formulating this thesis that canonical consciousness is the continuation of dogmatic consciousness. I will make a pause. The influence of Father Sergei Bulgakov on his thinking was great at that period, but not with his ideas. As regards ideas, Afanasiev is a completely different thinker. But in terms of the interest of dogmatic issues, because Afanasiev attended a dogmatic seminar of Father Sergei, to which Father Sergei invited people personally. It was a small but intellectually very powerful seminar. So Afanasiev answered to my question, what follows? What is the dogmatic teaching of the Church, by his subsequent research about the early Church. So he formulated this thesis for himself, and what he was doing after that, he was studying this he was studying the early history of the Church, trying to discover under the historical vestments of the Church, its early structure, which in his view was the most normative one. He was looking for ecclesiastical norms. And the book some of you now have, I see it is The Church of the Holy Spirit, is the major answer to that question. That was his opus magnum, first dissertation, ready in 49-50. Then it grew into the book, and he was working and writing his book until his death in 1966. The book remained slightly unfinished, and it was published only by his widow, with the help of the successor of Father Nicholas as the chair of canon law department at professor of canon law and St. Serge Institute, Father Andrei Fyrilas. Right, that's the story. And as Father Andrei asked me to make emphasis on Father Nicholas as canon lawyer, I will tell several more things about his canon law activity. These two articles are not only his not his only theological writings. His major theological work is his course of canon law, unpublished, or rather to say, only 2 fragments of this course were published. One is the book Entrance to the Church, Вступление в Церковь, and it's a fragment of his canon law course. It was published first in immigration, but there is there was publication in Russia in at least one in the 90s, and another fragment is published under the title Ecclesiology, period, entering the holy orders. Ecclesiologia, period, вступление в клир. I repeat the title slowly because there were 2 editions, and in the second edition they gave Irenaeus title. So this is these 2 fragments are published. The rest is not. The course is still on the shelves of the library of St. Serge Institute. Partially I have it. Another part of it is in the former IMCA press in Paris. It would be a nice task to publish this course, and I'm going to publish a fragment on Constantinople, primacy of Constantinople. So this about his other extant canon law writings. And one more important thing about Father Nicholas, and here we are coming to his to evaluation of Nicholas Afanasiev as a very original theologian. He seems to us original. In fact, he was very independent. And well, in my humble opinion, it's the most independent theologian of the 20th century, independent in terms of, and most consistent. His major achievement was in the field of ecclesiology. And he was influential in Catholicism and in Orthodox theology too. But he is probably less known as his pupil, his outstanding pupil, Father Alexander Shmemon. But for me, if you read one and another, you discover that he is a pupil. Very few readers of Father Alexander understand that. And in terms of ideas, Afanasiev was a more powerful theologian. It's not to diminish the importance of Father Alexander, because he had other merits. He was a beautiful, he was a very powerful writer with some strong poetic gifts, and with the gift to convince the reader. But in terms of ideas, he developed many or used many ideas of Afanasiev. And so I started with the statement of his originality. which is completely true, and due to which he is probably less known and perceived by us with greater difficulties. One of the features of this originality, well known, I have to say about this, was the his so-called antinomism, his statement that church and law are incompatible, and people who learn these statements of Afanasiev, they are usually surprised, and there are authors who are mocking Afanasiev. Professor of canon law, claims that church and law are incompatible. This idea of incompatibility of church and law is especially developed by Afanasiev. It was developed in one of his speeches in St. Serge Institute, The Power of Love, which later became the last, I think the 8th chapter of the Church of the Holy Spirit. I don't know if it was his idea to add the power of love to the Church of the Holy Spirit, or his wife and editors decided to do that. But here you can read a very powerful, strong philippics against the law in the church, and strong arguments instead of in favor of power of love in the church. And this is completely correct and completely intelligible, but this misled almost all interpreters of Afanasiev, including me when I started doing research into Afanasiev. In my book about Afanasiev, I was mumbling something about Afanasiev and law. Actually, the best recent writer who attract attention to what Afanasiev thought about law and interpreted his attitude towards the law was Anastasia Wooden, who is working at the Catholic University of America and who wrote a dissertation about his theology and preparing currently the book on his theology. This attitude was attitude was as follows. And you can see it especially in his introduction to this book, Entrance to the Church. That is that fragment of his canon law cause of which I was talking. And basically it's the book about canon law aspects and ecclesiological aspects of baptism. There is in the introduction, he again writes several strong negative phrases against the law, but then accepts the existence of the church as and normal existence as something normal of rules. So the church law is alien to the nature of the church, but there are many rules in the church, and it is normal. And in his understanding, the law was what entered the church in with Constantine in Constantinian period, the Roman law. With this law, church was indeed, which had rules until that moment too. With this law, church was incompatible. So Afanasiev never developed this topic clearly, but to summarize, he is against, he argues against the law that entered the church with the Constantine, but recognizes and accepts that there is another law in the church, law sui generis, but in this law there are several. In the Roman law, which entered the church, there are several things which are incompatible with that law that the church had previously, like sanctions for violence, like extremely juridical nature of that law. So the thesis about the antinomism of Father Afanasiev should be understood like this. He was a canon lawyer, and he accepted the right of the law to exist in the church, but he didn't call that law. He thought these are rules somehow different from the law.
Thank you.
But in modern terms, we would just say that it's a law of a different kind, law sui generis. Right. That's what I wanted to tell you briefly about Father Nicholas. And I'm open to questions and then we will see if you have them, if you can formulate them right now, or if you are curious about any about anything I was talking about.
Right. Yes, I have a question. Can you tell us a bit more about his methodology as a canon law professor, about his classes? Well, you mentioned that is his class, joining the clergy, entering the clergy. But I mean, can you maybe say a few words about him as a canon law professor at St. Serge?
Well, Afanasiev taught the course of canon law from 1930 or 31 and until his death. With the break during the period he was absent in Paris, 1940-47. When Germans occupied Paris, he moved to southern France, and then Metropolitan Vladimir Tikhanitsky sent him as a parish priest to Tunisia. From 40 to 47, he was a priest of the parish of several parishes actually in Tunisia. His course of law was historical one. It was very detailed. It's not manuscript, typed script. Typescript of his course consists of several volumes. It was reworked once after his Eucharistic ecclesiology was formed, after his return from Tunis, because his Eucharistic ecclesiology was formed after Tunis. So after 1947, there in the land of Cyprian of Carthage, he got some inspiration from the whole situation because he was a priest, the only priest of one big parish, in addition of two parishes, one in Tunis, another in the capital in Tunis, another in Bizerta, and sometimes he also replaced Greek priests in Tunis and in Sfax. So basically, there were moments when he was the only Orthodox priest in Tunis. And after his returning from Tunis, he started quickly write his dissertation. The idea was ready. What was missing in the pre-war period he received in Africa, in Northern Africa. And these articles, they still belong to the period of finding the way of his theology. He formulated the thesis that the key is in the teaching of the church. And after in Tunisia and after his return to Paris, he started writing quickly about the historical book, about the structure of the church, about ecclesiological book, and reworks his cause of canon law in the light of his new teaching, for which he soon, at the latest in 1951, found the name Eucharistic ecclesiology, which later became very popular and started to be applied for very different things. So basically, his methodology was historical once, but the course, it's not even in the sense that there are technical topics. There are technical topics, and his wife reports that he didn't like these technical topics, so he fairly told to his students about the presuppositions or preconditions of marriage, etc. But that was not the topic he liked. Although he has a very good article about marriage as ecclesiastical sacrament, late one. I translated it to Russian. Yeah, so some topics were technical, some topics were more theological, but in general he saw the canon law as the one of the sides of ecclesiology, and he developed his canon law cause to the great extent as a cause of ecclesiology. For him, these two disciplines were inseparable. And as you see that it has also a dogmatic background. So canons are inseparable from the dogmatic teaching, and canon law is inseparable from ecclesiology.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions? Please.
The third section of the second article, Father Nicholas, he talks about the structure of the church and how the structure of the church is not connected to law as such, but resulted from the very essence of the church. So if I were to ask Father Nicholas right now, so what is the relationship though between the law and the structure of the law in the future, if we're looking at the dogmas as he points out later, that the dogmas are the church and the dogmas are the essence of the church? So,
well, I can. It's probably a good question. I cannot answer it because. Well, you see, since there is no developed dogmatical teaching of the church, so he probably thought that it is his business to establish these dogmatical features of the church through history, through theological research. And that's what his program for the rest of his life, from 40s onwards. And his answer was individual. His answer was individual, but it was an extremely good answer, which was then accepted by several leading theologians. His answer was that at the heart of the church, there is the Eucharist that is in the heart of the church. In a very, very simplifying the matters, you can say that Zizoulas likes this statement that Eucharist is identical with the church. Identical with the church. It simplifies a lot, but that's the essence. But again, very good to read the book of Father Nicholas and to see what exactly we mean by the Eucharist. Of course, it's not, he means not ritualistic parts of our liturgy, not developed ritual, etc. It's not an appeal to pray, to have long Eucharistic services. It's something else. It's an appeal to return to the basics of Eucharist as common prayer, as con-celebration, as meal, as fellowship meal. This is very often forgotten by critics of Eucharistic ecclesiology, especially of those who prefer quick criticism to thorough reading of what they criticize.
Yes.
And of course there was no lack of critics, because especially Anastasia had a very good remarks about that. Every recent PhD writing his first book or dissertation felt that it was, and writing on the topic, felt it was his duty to write something critical about Eucharistic ecclesiology, Zizioulas included.
Thank you. I would like to point out to contributions that Dr. Alexandrov made, pointing out that references to Afanasiev, they are based on his translations of his writings, and not many people who interpret him either positively or negatively, exactly they read his writings in original.
Yeah, and it's not only the matter of the language, as for example with Zizioulas happened. It's the matter of thorough reading, And now there are also several well-known, but I would say, I'm looking for the word, superficial theologians, people, you know, about whom Vladimir Lossky used to say, writes a lot, understands little, who are critical about Afanasiev, but their approach lacks thorough reading of his works, and that is presupposition of any theological work. First you read, then you criticize, if you can.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Yeah. Oh, okay, Brother Adam, please.
I had one question, which was for the critics of Father Nicholas, what is the alternative to the Eucharistic approach to ecclesiology? If the thesis from Father Nicholas is that the Eucharist is the center of the church and everything revolves on the Eucharist, well then what's the counter argument to that? What's the alternative view of the Orthodox theologians who criticize him?
There were many alternatives and several attempts to correct in this way or another way. Among recent ones, I can mention the so-called baptismal ecclesiology, about which some theologians are talking for the last 15 or probably 20 years, but never anybody they fail to expose what finally, there is no any writing summarizing what can it be. I won't mention the names. Then the reproach we together with Father Andrei heard in the first day of the IOTA conference is that Eucharistic ecclesiology turns the church into only Sunday event, which is true to the great extent, but it is not Eucharistic ecclesiology. It's life that turns church into Sunday event. But the alternative is seen in thorough thorough following hours, non-Eucharistic services. Well, again, it's not the developed it's not a developed ecclesiology, it's just a critical remark done at this conference by currently well-known theologian. What else? Baptismal, then restoration. This approach I can summarize by the words restoration of the liturgy of time. It was formulated like this, or redemption of time. And this what comes to my mind immediately. You can find more corrections. Probably I'm not curious. I contributed to the field just how to say when I was younger. Because well, I was Reddish and Afanasiev, and I accidentally read, not accidentally, continuing my studies, I read something of Zizioulas, and I was surprised by his lack of knowledge of Afanasiev's theology and his brave criticism of him. And then I wrote a polemical article about him. But Zizioulas is a complicated case. At least sometimes he is not a bad theologian.
Thank you so much. So I think we did great on time. So we will conclude with a prayer. So then I disconnect, and then maybe I will get to you if you have a few minutes. So once we're done with the class, yeah. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And one more word, Father Andrei, thank you for invitation. It was indeed on short notice. That's why, sorry if I was sometimes slightly chaotic, because I had no time to prepare a lecture. I was. Well.
You see, we finished on time. There was time for questions to ask. No, I mean, I think there is nothing else for me to wish. No, really. No, this from I hope students feel the same, but that's how I feel about your work.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Sure. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. That was great. That was great. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.